Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, we have almost hit the end of the month of November, a month that has brought a lot of turnarounds for this Milwaukee Bucks team. So Camille and I will dig into who has been the most responsible. Should we let our guard down tomorrow night against the Washington Wizards and look ahead to a schedule that remains pretty favorable for this Bucks team for the next month or so? We dig into all of that next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day and for checking out the Locked On Bucks podcast. That's right, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Bucks daily newsletter, your one-stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered directly to your inbox. You can sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That is lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, the month of November started okay for the Bucks, but it picked up big time. And you have a chance to close out a very, very strong month for this Bucks team. We said a couple of days ago, that win against, I believe, the Hornets ensured, hey, at the very least, the Bucks are going to be 500 this month. And now you know you're going to have a winning record this month. You've had some gritty wins in there too. I mean, I know the schedule hasn't really been the most challenging, but Camille, one of the big talking points we had last year was, man, why are the Bucks struggling with teams that theoretically shouldn't? And that to me has been one of the biggest changes this month.
It truly has, because if that wasn't the case, we would not be at 500 if we saw this Bucks team playing in ways that we have seen them play last year, even earlier in the season with those losses in Chicago or against Chicago and Brooklyn. But to see them come out and stack those victories, I mean, you beat Toronto, you beat Detroit in overtime, which again, probably that shouldn't have been in overtime anyways, but we're not talking about the refs this morning. You had that great win against Houston, and then you beat Chicago, you beat Indiana, you beat Charlotte, you beat Miami. And then to close out the month, you have Washington at home, the worst team in the NBA by very, very many metrics, the worst team. So if they can come out tomorrow night against the Wizards and take care of business, then it'll be a really good way to close out the month strong for this Bucks team that was 2-8 at one point and now find themselves at 500, 9-9.
Yeah, and so you can close out the month with a winning record in the month, but also a winning record overall, which, as you mentioned, a 2-8. It was getting pretty dark in these show chats that we had on social, everywhere you could find it. It was dark, especially externally, in terms of Bucks discourse. And you know, we had said it's still early. There's a lot of time to solve this. I don't know about you, Camille. I remained confident that the Bucks were going to turn this around, but it did make you level set. Okay, we were pretty confident that this is probably going to be a 2 or a 3 seed coming into the season. Maybe we have to readjust expectations to a 4 or a 5 seed, possibly even a 6 seed. Then you saw what the Eastern Conference looked like, and that again is going to be the most important thing here for the Bucks. We'll get to the schedule that comes up after the Wizards in a second. And the caveat is we don't know 2 of those games because of the NBA Cup. The Bucks could be in the knockout round and semifinals, and then you're playing 2 teams with winning records and better teams. They could not qualify if they lose to the Pistons on Tuesday. And then who knows? It could be another game with the Wizards or teams of that like that round out those 2 games. But the fact that you're in the Eastern Conference, I had to like quadruple check this Tuesday night after the Heat game, and I haven't checked since. But after Tuesday night's game, the Bucks, I believe, were 25th in remaining opponent win percentage, strength of schedule. 25th.
For the entire season or
for the
just
rest of their schedule.
wow.
And it's not like it's been, it's been a front-loaded, very difficult schedule. That is a product of the Eastern Conference being what it is. And I think a big part of it, you have 3 games left with Philly. Philly's 3-14. So you thought, okay, those are going to be very tough games. Who knows? By the time you get to that next Philly game, they might already have the wheels in motion for let's shut it down and play for next season.
Yeah, things can still change. It's interesting looking at this point in the season, though, and seeing that it's like the 24th strongest schedule, which means it's one of the easiest schedules down the stretch. But I think part of that, to your point, is just that some teams have been underperforming in the East. Like, although Philly is 3-14, do you think Philly is like an easy target going forward? Some people might be like, yes, it's done in Philly. But there is some level of respect that I'm going to have for Embiid if he's on the court, for Maxey, for Paul George, although I have questions around that grouping and just how they're going to coalesce going forward. But anything can happen on any given night. So like I don't overlook them going forward. But I think it's really interesting to see that type of schedule being lined up for the Bucks based on how everything is going, given the fact that when they started the season, they had one of the toughest schedules for that first 10-game slate. And of course, that was based off of last year's standings. But to see how they handled that first 10-game stretch was, as we mentioned, 2-8, come out here, get some victories, stack it up, get back to 9-9, and then looking ahead of you and what you have, it looks like easy sailing for the next month or so. But even though the schedule numbers say that, I still look at that break like after All-Star break into March, where I'm like, I know on those teams, you cannot overlook what the Bucks are going to have coming forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just what this backs up is there is a difficult pocket of schedule, but for the most part, figure your stuff out, beat the teams you're supposed to beat, and you're going to be in a pretty good spot. Now, granted, you can apply that to the rest of the teams in the Eastern Conference, but as we've said for the Bucks, just be healthy when the playoffs come around. As long as you're in the top 4, and even then, if you're 5th, if you're healthy, you can sell me on a lot of things in terms of seeding. So just start to figure things out and the optics. Like, it's been great optics so far. If you went to the eye doctor, you'd have 20/20 vision with what we've seen in November. That's what we're looking for. Before we move off that schedule point, I just circled back to confirm. Camille, the 15 easiest remaining schedules in the league. How many teams do you think would be Eastern Conference teams?
I'm going to guess 11.
You're going to have to guess more.
12, 13?
14 of the 15 belong to Eastern Conference teams. The lone Western Conference holdout is the Oklahoma City Thunder. Other than that, the Cavs, Knicks, Celtics, Bucks, and Magic are all in the top 10 for easiest remaining schedule. And it's still, basically 3/4 of the season remaining. So it's still a huge sample size. You can't really point to that until you get to 15, 20 games left. But it's just worth pointing out, look, this is the state of the Eastern Conference. And this is the biggest reason why we said, just figure it out. Stop digging, right? Philadelphia's still digging their hole. Stop the dig and start to climb out of it. And you'll be in a pretty good spot as things start to progress here. I mentioned that schedule. It has a couple of tough games coming up, but overwhelmingly, it's not that difficult coming up. I mean, I think at this point, the next 14 games that the Bucks are going to play, again, we don't know 2 of them.
Right.
2 teams have winning records, and that's the Celtics and the Cavs. Other than that, 2 games with the Wizards, 2 games with the Nets, 2 more games with the Bulls. Like, that's the type of schedule that you have here to ride you basically into the first week of January.
Listen, the East, I understand why those Western Conference teams are floating out the idea of restructuring the playoffs field 1 through 16. Like, listen, y'all, the Eastern Conference is not doing it for us, but for the Bucks, it's a good thing. And looking at the schedule, as you mentioned, in addition to that, they also have Washington again before the year closes out. The Boston game is going to be a good one, though, because of the competition the Bucks have been playing. I am really looking forward to next Friday's game against the Celtics, just to kind of get that measuring stick of saying, like, well, where are we now? Because, again, The problem with some of those lesser teams was the effort and the focus that the Bucks would come out with and the execution. And we haven't had those questions about the Bucks when it comes to them playing better teams. But with all the goodwill that they've been building, the rotation kind of finding itself, players understanding their roles better, playing better in them, that Celtics game is going to be a really fun one to watch just to see how everything is looking, especially after playing Boston already earlier this season.
Yeah, 1 week from today, the Bucks and the Boston Celtics for the final time this regular season. Month of November, though, has been very strong for the Bucks. So who has really led the charge? If we had a MVP or NVP, if you will, who would that be? Camille and I will get into that discussion coming up next on Locked On Bucks. Well, if you want to celebrate with and stay connected to people who are far away, maybe you're missing someone this holiday season, you want them to be a part of your festivities from afar, or your loved ones that live far away and you wish they could just be close to you this time of year, we have the perfect gift for you. Skylight Frame is the touchscreen digital photo frame your whole family will love. You can upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds. So easy to use that the setup takes less than 60 seconds. You can invite friends and family to easily share photos via the free Skylight mobile app or email. No account or subscription is required. You can add new photos straight from your phone from anywhere. It only takes a tap on the phone to send new photos to a frame across the country. It is the fastest, easiest way to keep loved ones in the loop. They'll feel so much more connected to you this holiday season and beyond. Touchscreen is a game changer with this as well. You can swipe through photos, tap to see new photos sent, tap the heart button to say thank you to the sender as well. As a new special limited time offer for our listeners, get $20 off your purchase of Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NBA. That is Skylight Frame, SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/NBA. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/NBA. So it's been a lot of things. And if we had to pinpoint who's most responsible for this, like we kind of had some conversations. I think you and I talked about this a week or so ago. I know I had some conversations off air with some other broadcasters too. And look, the reality is it starts with Giannis. The fact that Giannis has been as good as we've seen him. We talked at length about what he's done last year. You look at the raw scoring numbers and the efficiency that he's brought out. But the team was a disappointment. So he was never really inserted into the MVP conversation. We talked a little bit about this. I did with Marcus Johnson just the other day too, in that I really wonder if this team gets up to third consistently and hovers around there with the way he's playing, is that name going to start to pop up more? But I think the larger point is, well, Giannis starts this because he has played like one of the three best players in the world so far this season. And it's not just the scoring, leading the league in doing so, the efficiency, the mid-range, the defense that we've seen from Giannis. So none of this is possible if Giannis is not playing like this. I think we recognize that and set it aside. So if we exclude Giannis from who's most responsible for this, where would you start?
I guess you have to start with that cold start. There's a couple ways to go with this because I think what we're seeing from the Bucks is accumulation of a few different things. So the Giannis piece, if you can't choose Giannis, which I'm going to say it now for the everydayers, I'm going to slowly start my MVP campaigning for Giannis on the low because it's still early. So I might just be saying like MVP level play from Giannis going forward just to kind of hype that up. But I think you got to look at Damian Lillard as well because there have been so many questions around Dame's fit. There's been so much consternation around should the Bucks have done this trade and they have been better off if they never did this and so on and so forth. But looking at what Dame is doing, the thing that stands out to me with Dame and his play is his confidence and how comfortable he feels in the system. He's averaging nearly 8 assists a game right now. If his numbers hold the way that they are right now, this will be the second most assists that Damian Lillard has ever averaged in a season. And he has been setting up his teammates. And that's the piece of Dame's game that I really like, how he's been using his gravity to set others up. So he's someone I think you have to give some credit to as well. But I do see a comment coming through here. And they said that it's for Brooke. It's Brooke for them because Dame and Giannis are going to be the stars, but they needed someone, and he answered immediately. And I would agree with that. I love Brooke Lopez getting some shine here because the role that he's been playing for this team as an anchor defensively, as well as finding his spots offensively, have been huge for the Bucks.
I'm glad you pointed that one out. Well, I'll just close this loop on Damian Lillard. To your point, he's got a 34% assist rate this season,
Crazy,
which
yeah.
I believe would be a career high and the highest since the bubble year in Portland. Like, that's the rate that he has been playing at so far this season. And, you know, one of the other remarkable things too is I want to say he has, it's either 7 or 8 30-point games already this season. And we've talked about Dame's, the shooting hasn't quite been, in terms of efficiency, what you were hoping to see yet. But when you look up at his scoring and say, man, he's shooting in the low 30s on threes, you haven't had quite as many Dame moments yet this season. Not to say those won't be coming, but you would have thought, oh, well, this is kind of a rough year for Dame. And yet you look up and see the volume of 30-point games that he has, that he just consistently gets to his mark with those things you mentioned. He's getting to the free throw line. And, you know, the eye test would tell you he's getting to the rim a lot more this year. It just feels like that. He's not. It's actually a lower rate than last year, but I think it just backs up the ball movement and everything that he's doing in the paint. So, like, that's the tricky part, is that's just tracking shots that he takes at the rim. It's not tracking those moments that he gets into the paint and kicks it out. And that's been huge for this offense this season. But I do want to touch on Brooke Lopez. So I'll say this. I don't know if Brooke would be the guy that I would go with, but he's in the conversation. And not to give away too much, but I just did the Here District with Marcus and Chris Johnson, and we talked quite a bit about this a couple of days ago. I think it's going to be next week's episode. Brooke Lopez, to me, is, you know, we talked about Giannis being the consistency last year in a season full of change. Brooke Lopez, consistency would be the word to describe him in his, 7 years now? 7 or 8 years in a Bucks uniform. The guy has been the model of consistency. And you and I have fought many battles defending Brooke and his value. It seems to come in waves where we recognize how great Brooke is, and then maybe the defense isn't so great around him, and it's, well, he's too old, you got to trade him, he's slow, and everything else. And then things like this start to happen again, where you recognize just how valuable he is. Bucks fans are going to sorely miss Brooke Lopez when he is gone because of that consistency. Not just when he's on the court. The fact that he's on the court as much as he has been an Iron Man. And for somebody that is in their mid to upper 30s and just a couple of years removed from back surgery, that is a marvel in itself. But I think this year just backs up, he is still a very valuable player. He needs the help around him. And I think that's the case with a lot of shot blocking bigs too. It can't just be, well, we got a disaster on the perimeter, this guy's going to fix it. We saw how it went last year. And all throughout Brooks' career here, he always had a point of attack defender, whether it was Bledsoe or Drew Holiday. The schemes under Bud would always bring over some help at the nail too. And then you had Giannis that was hovering. So Brooke was the last line. And it's not to take away from what he did. He did it very well, but you need all those things to fall into place. They clearly did not last year. And I'm not saying it's there yet, but it's been a much improved perimeter defense. We've seen Giannis used like he was early in Bud's time here as well. And I think Brooke Lopez, to say he's been even better this year, I think would almost be a disservice to him, because I think he has largely been the same guy his entire time here. It's just the help around him that makes it look like, oh man, Brooks having a great year.
That's so important. We talked about that a lot last season, because it's like, if you don't have strong point of attack defenders, you're going to be setting your big up to be in positions where they're going to defend 2-on-1 very quickly. And it's normally going to leave something easy open for another opposing player. So you have to have a strong point of attack defender, which is like, to answer this question, like the co-stars of like, who are the breakout stars? It's your Andre Jackson Jr. and it's your AJ Green, two guys who have come in and been really strong. point of attack defenders. For Andre, we knew he had that in him. We saw the flashes last year with the athleticism, the way that he's able to change the game with his energy. But the fouling was a problem for Ajax last year. So seeing him this year kind of get that under control a bit more, rein that in, and just learn how to play at the NBA level even better has been such a big positive for this Milwaukee Bucks team. Like, there were plays in that Heat game where he led guys perfectly to Brook Lopez the way that he's supposed to as a perimeter defender. So shout out to Andre Jackson Jr., shout out to AJ Green. And honestly, I don't think anyone wanted the Bucks season to start off the way that it did at 2-8. But if that opened the door for Andre and AJ to start getting those looks a bit more consistently, and now they're part of the rotation going forward, I'm fine with that, because it's really cool to see these young Bucks respond. Because Doc had mentioned for like AJ Green, he was solidified in the lineup, had a bad training camp, had a bad preseason, lost his minutes. He had to get those back. The Bucks go on that losing streak. Doc's trying all different kinds of rotations, and he's like, okay, AJ Green, you're working. Andre, you're working. So like, if that's part of the learning curve that we had to go through to get those guys some consistent minutes, I'm going to say it's worth it based on the results that we've gotten from those guys in the game and how they've been affecting the defense.
Yeah, and again, I think Brook has been great this year. So everything that we just set up wasn't to say, yeah, I mean, it's just because the guys around him. No, Brook has been fantastic this year, last year, his entire time here in a Bucks jersey. So he does warrant being in the conversation. To me, though, it's really one of the two names that you just mentioned. So we'll get into that conversation. The latest on Chris Middleton, if there is a latest, will we finally see him return to the floor against those Washington Wizards on Saturday? And I know you mentioned just how bleak things have been in our nation's capital, but we'll take a closer look at those Wizards and what the Bucks are going to be dealing with tomorrow night. Man, quite a week for the Bucks. Just two games played after that gauntlet in terms of volume of games. Much needed time off, and maybe the right time to get Chris Middleton back on the floor. So we'll get into that conversation next here on Locked On Bucks. Time to talk to you now about our friends over at FanDuel as we get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, and do it all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. It's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So you went with Dame. We had somebody point out Brook Lopez in the comments. They both have been instrumental in big parts of this. Again, we're excluding Giannis because none of this I don't think is possible if Giannis isn't playing like he is right now. To me, though, I keep coming back to one of those two names that you mentioned in Andre Jackson Jr. and AJ Green. And I'm almost inclined to say it is AJ Green that has sparked a lot of this turnaround, because you just think back to when he really started to carve out minutes again in the rotation. And, you know, I remember going back to preseason, AJ Green was basically playing garbage time in the preseason where you're thinking, what's going on?
It wasn't shooting well either.
Yeah, everything we heard about AJ over the summer, and John Horst comments about the 6 veterans that are a part of the core here, and then the young guys that they're bringing along, and AJ Green, one of those, our guy Chris Livingston, one of those that we've really yet to see here. But Doc himself said AJ had a bad camp, so like, and it's something that you and I brought up a lot on this show. You're always going to start with your veterans because you don't want to start with the young guys, and then if they lose out the job to the veterans, what does that mean for that guy, not just this season, but beyond? And how does he handle that? So you're always going to give the first right of refusal to your vets.
Yep.
Case in point, Pat Connaughton. And not to get sidetracked, Pat Connaughton's been good this year. Like, the athleticism is the question with him. But Pat Connaughton has had some good games for this team. And with AJ, when he came along, the Bucks were in a shooting funk. I mean, at that point, Taurean Prince was the only guy hitting shots on this team. He started to heat up and hit shots. But we've always said, Camille, his offense is what opens the door, his shooting, for him to get on the floor. His defense is what's going to determine how long he stays on the floor. And his defense, when he started playing, he's knocking down shots, but what he was doing defensively, you got the sense that Doc Rivers was like, okay, AJ, this is what I saw last year. This is what we're looking for. Here's some more opportunities. And it changed things immensely for the team because it gave you another shooter on the floor. It gave you someone that you could trust. I think it took some of the burden off of Gary Trent Jr. as well, that we saw Gary Trent Jr. start to come into his own. And, you know, it's not just AJ. Andre Jackson has, I think, done a tremendous job this season as well. And we talked about this a few shows ago. I think Doc Rivers deserves a lot of credit for how he has used him. But the larger point of this is it's funny how things work sometimes, that it's the old line of the best laid plans. I don't know how much of this increase with both of these guys, you get the sense with AJ it would have eventually come, but I don't know how much of this playing time had to do with the Bucks being 2-8, how much of it had to do with Gary Trent Jr.'s struggles and back spasms or whatnot. But the important part is it happened, and it's here to stay at this point. Like, we've seen Pat Connaughton get 4 DNPs. We saw DeLon Wright not playing for 2 or 3 games consecutively. So all the criticisms of Doc doesn't, and any coach for that matter, doesn't play young guys. Well, I think what we've seen now through this first month and a half is enough to show you, no, it's not just we're going to play the vets. Like, we gave the vets the chance. These are the guys that we need. So if there's injuries or other matchup-based things, that's when we're going to lean on a Pat Connaughton. Who knows? It might be the same setup for DeLon Wright, too, when Ryan Rollins is back into the mix here. But this is here to stay, and I really think it was those 2 guys, and specifically AJ, that helped trigger this.
Yeah, because they brought that defensive edge this team was sorely needing at the time as well. And I think it just made the lineups make a lot more sense having those 2 out there. To the AJ Green part, it makes me think of Ryan Rollins because I love the AJ Green pickup because he started off as a two-way guy for this Bucks team. And he's been able to, learn with the organization, practice with the herd, and kind of get his feet underneath them, understand the coaching direction, and make something of that. He's still really early on into his NBA career at this point. So right now we're seeing this guy who's a 3-and-D guy, which I did not expect the defense part from AJ Green coming in, and the way that he's been able to improve on that end of the floor has been impressive because he already had the intelligence. He knew what he should be doing, just putting it into practice a bit more for him. So I love that signing and just how they use that two-way spot, which makes me think about Ryan Rollins as someone who, like, maybe it's not this year, and especially now with the shoulder dislocation that he has and looks like he's going to attempt to play through this season because it's going to need surgery to clean up. But it seems like another guy where it's like, keep an eye on Ryan Rollins down the pipeline as somebody who could come in and make an impact, because from what we saw of him early on in the games that he did get some playing time, again, the defense just jumps off the page. That's what he was known for, like in his scouting profile coming into the league. It's like that defensive edge that he has with that long wingspan. So seeing what he can do as well. So I just wanted to also just point out the use of the two-way contracts, having that G League team, and how it really is going to be like a pipeline, which is something that I'm really interested in, given how restrictive the new CBA is for teams. And I mentioned that might just mean it's going to be an increase in player development, like just really trying to nail that down for teams going forward. Maybe part of the reason why you're seeing this coaching staff as well be so large, because you have that player development aspect to it. So, I didn't expect to go down this rabbit hole of like, who's been the biggest part to this, and talking about like, hey, keep an eye on Ryan Rollins going forward too. But just the process of having those young guys come through, I think it's going to be beneficial for the Bucks.
Yeah, and just the way that we've seen the Bucks progress in how they've used that two-way spot. And it's not just the Bucks. Other teams have kind of figured out, here's what you got to look for. I know we mentioned this a lot with AJ last year, Duncan Robinson comps, and we've seen AJ, I think, blow past that at this point. It's not just a guy that's out there to shoot. But the point was, look, he's got this lethal skill set. And the Miami Heat have done a good job, for the most part, of finding guys with that one trait and developing it and saying, okay, how do we maximize the rest around you and build up the other parts of your game just enough that thing that you're bringing to the table is so much more amplified, and we have to keep you on the floor. And that was kind of the hope with AJ early on when you saw the way he shot the ball. But as we mentioned, this year and last year as well, down the stretch, you saw, no, I think AJ Green's a two-way player here in the terms of, nobody's going to accuse him of being a lockdown defender, but he's not going to get beat. He moves his feet well, he's strong, and you really got to work to beat him. So that has been huge for this team. And to that point you made, I'm curious to see, year 2 and 3 of Ryan Rollins. And if last year was technically year 1, but it was a handful of games when the Bucks acquired him, but just to see him go forward a year from now, 2 years from now, that type of progression that he makes, if it's along the same lines of AJ Green. And if that's the case, we're getting very far ahead of ourselves. But suddenly all the doom and gloom over where this team was headed, like that's what we mentioned. You got to get younger, and it's going to be so difficult to do so with the draft situation and everything else. You lucked out with Gary Trent Jr., a young player signing the veterans minimum. I've heard 76ers fans already having the conversation that we did about Gary Trent early in the offseason when the Bucks signed him about Gershon Yabusele of, oh, wait, we're not going to be able to re-sign him next year because we brought him in on the vet minimum. And in the case of Yabusele, he is going to have some suitors next season with how he's playing. Gary Trent Jr. probably, you would think as well. But that's the tricky part about being in that spot with veteran minimum. So you got to get younger. And one way to do that is, do we have young players we can develop? You're seeing that with AJ Green. We're seeing it with Andre Jackson Jr. And I think we started to see it with Ryan Rollins as well. Tomorrow night, the Wizards. You mentioned the numbers for the Wizards. Not great, to put it mildly. So as of this moment, I'm not sure what it is on NBA.com. I would assume much worse. But the Wizards have a 122 defensive rating. That would be the worst in the history of the NBA. That's what you're going up against Saturday night, tomorrow night.
Yeah, a Wizards team that is last in offense, 104.4 offensive rating on cleaning the glass, worst defense. They're not great at rebounding. They're not great at getting to the free throw line. Like if you pull up to clean the glass, it's a lot of blue around the Wizards, which is not a good thing for them. So all that we talked about in this episode about, hey, these Bucks are turning it around. We've seen them taking care of business. Closing out the month strong against a Wizards team that has been last in just about everything in the NBA is going to be something I need to see. I need to see it for this Bucks team as well. For this Wizards team, I think they've lost 13 straight games at this point now. Like they're on a crazy.
That's the danger, is
losing streak.
Going to end sooner or later,
right? And you don't want that to be against you. So I'm hoping the Bucks come out with the required focus, execution, and take care of business against the Wizards.
Yeah. I don't know what to point to for the Wizards in terms of, man, what does this team really do well here? Defense is not it. Jordan Poole has looked much better this season, so I guess that's the positive for the Wizards. But you just look up and down at everything for this group. They're in the middle of the pack in the amount of threes that they take. They do not get a lot of corner threes. That's a product of, you look at the point guards that have left there over the years, missing out on that. They're in the middle of the pack everywhere else, getting to the rim, mid-range shots. So and that's just the volume of shots that they're taking. The efficiency and accuracy numbers, as you pointed to, are much worse. They are the second worst three-point shooting team in the bottom 5 in efficiency in the mid-range. They're okay at the rim, but that's really going to be tested by the Bucks. And you think the Bucks look at this and say, man, we're licking our chops here. Like, you don't take a lot of threes. Great. You want to get to the rim? Perfect. We got Giannis and Brook Lopez.
Yeah, and maybe Chris Middleton tomorrow. We'll have to see.
And I suppose not only that, we should say maybe Giannis too. That I think the belief was, well, you get him a week off and that's going to be great for him. True, but I always kind of felt, and I heard, I think when they did their recap, Nate Duncan on Dunked On brought this up too. Whenever it's a late scratch, that's what always makes you like, I don't know, because it's clearly something you weren't planning on. Mm-hmm. And with this, it wasn't. I forget how it was termed, but it was essentially swelling in the knee or fluid buildup in the knee for Giannis. And that's not what we had seen on the injury report for
it was
the
a calf on the report, I believe.
Yeah, previous handful of games. So not to say it's time to panic, but those, whenever it's a late scratch, those can oftentimes be it might be a couple of games because this wasn't something that we were prepping for or anticipating. So maybe you don't have Giannis either. But, one thing we didn't touch on as we wrap here is we saw this last year too. When Giannis was off the floor, it gave Damian Lillard the chance to say, okay, I can still be the guy that I was in Portland. And that, I think, is the other thing worth pointing out when we talk about guys instrumental here. A few people I saw point out the locker room for the Bucks and Brook Lopez and what he brings to that. Damian Lillard, too, and the fact that this guy was Giannis in Portland, and he has accepted, I'm the number 2 on this team. Like, this is Giannis's team. I'm going to be the point guard and the guy that sets up others. If he's out, I can be the Dame of old. I can still get to 30 by free throws and getting hot for stretches. But this goes through him, and you haven't heard a peep from Damian Lillard.
No, he seems like he wants to win. Dame wants to win, and he's going to do what he needs to do in order to do so. But having a guy next to him like Giannis, that just means like his plate doesn't have to be as heavy going forward. So he really seems to have fallen into that role of like, I don't necessarily need to do this. Again, the assist numbers allude to that as well with how he's been playing and trying to set everyone else up. So I love it for Dame. Like, if there is no Giannis tomorrow, then you can look forward to Dame being Dame. I'm sure teams are going to look to try to be aggressive, like the Heat were blitzing and trapping.
Yeah.
It's getting the ball out of his hands because the Bucks don't have as many playmakers when there's no Giannis and no Chris on the court as well. So all in all, I just want to see a Bucks win to close out the month of November. It'll be a really great sports week if they can do that. Bucks beat the Heat in Miami. You had the Packers beat the Dolphins. Just close the week out strong for me, Bucks, and I'll be a happy camper.
Yeah, I mean, the week, you had the Packers beat the Niners and the Dolphins.
And on Sunday, that's right.
I mean, you had wins against the Niners, the Miami Heat. You won on Thanksgiving for the Packers. You could close out the month with another win if you're the Bucks. So this could be a great week for Wisconsin. The last thing is Michael points out in the comments, got to start beating stronger teams now. We agree, but you got to start getting them on the schedule too. So that's kind of the good part of this spot that the Bucks have found themselves in. We will be back once again Monday. Hopefully, we are recapping Chris Middleton's return, but at the very least, we get to start to look forward to a very interesting game that, frankly, is probably going to feel like a playoff game in Detroit for the Pistons, with the winner-take-all advancing to the knockout round in the NBA Cup between the Bucks and the Pistons. But and by the way, Camille, I know everybody's aware that we had Black Friday football on today, but the NBA rolling out the same with their schedule too, that we have staggered tips. The Knicks and Hornets tip off at 11. A very interesting one in Atlanta for the Hawks and the Cavs. The Cavs finally got that second loss to those Hawks. So that should be a fun one. You got afternoon basketball before easing into the evening slate as well. Pistons and Pacers play in the NBA Cup. Insignificant to the Bucks, because even if the Pistons lose that game, if they win Tuesday, they would get the head-to-head tiebreaker and win it. But we got 10 games today of hoops, and it starts at 11 o'clock, so 90 minutes from now.
Can't wait. I'm going to get into my comfy clothes, Justin. I'm going to do nothing but eat leftovers and watch basketball. I might see what the NFL got going on for their game today, but really, I'm here for the basketball. So it's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day. I hope everybody enjoyed their holiday as well. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe. And man, keep tuning in to Locked On Bucks.
Yeah, and a lot of interesting games this weekend as well. We can do some scouting shortly before the Bucks play tomorrow night. You got the Pistons hosting the 76ers, and at this point, Philadelphia is the car crash that I don't think anybody can look away from with how that's going. Sunday, no Packers game. We got the Cavs and the Celtics playing at 5, which is going to be quite a matchup. The Heat and the Celtics the following day. So there's a lot of very, very interesting matchups coming up here. And the Bucks have those Atlanta Hawks next week, who have looked very, very good to start the season, much better than I think people anticipated. You get Jalen Johnson breaking out. So a lot of good basketball Dyson Daniels, too, the Great Barrier Thief. So a lot of good basketball coming up here this next week. That will do it for today's show, though. For Camille, I'm Justin. We will catch up with you guys once again next week, hopefully recapping another win on Locked On Bucks.